All right, so I was just thinking about marriages and how wonderful God is and how wonderful the Bible is. I just stay in awe about God and the Word. So I was thinking about when God calls people to stand. And people have to understand and know this. No one chooses to stand on their own. God calls us to stand for various reasons. Um, and then I was thinking about how people will say what they think of marriage is, they define it. But if you look at the Bible, whether you look at the Old Testament or the New Testament, you will see that there was no perfect marriage. None. And every marriage was tested from Adam and Eve. We already know a story about that. Eve listened to the serpent. From Abraham and Sarah, after God had promised them a son, they chose to do their own thing by having Abraham have a child with Hagar and then sending Hagar and Ishmael away. Then we can think about, people might say, well, what about Ruth and Boaz? Ruth was a Moabite. And, she followed her mother in law, Naomi. And so that already made they already made a situation for Ruth and Boaz. Then you want to think about Job. They didn't say Job's wife's name, but she told Job when Job was going through all these attacks in Job 2:9 for him to just curse God and die. Now, there's 42 chapters to Job, and in chapter 2, he was told by his wife to curse God and die. Then we can think about Zachariah and Elizabeth. They lived honorably, and no, they didn't mention about them having any issues, but Elizabeth was barren, even though they lived an honorable life. They could have had issues as far as not having children and desiring children. Then we can look at the biggest thing, Joseph and Mary. Okay, Mary got pregnant. Joseph was going to put her away, as far as they were engaged and everything, but he was stopped by an angel, and the angel told him that Mary didn't do any wrong, and that she was carrying Jesus. So, and then they also had to flee from where they were, and because they was going to try to, people were, it was something out to try to kill Jesus. So, like I said, where in the Bible is there a perfect marriage? How about Hosea and Gomer? He was instructed to marry Gomer. Gomer kept leaving him. She was a prostitute. So, I don't know. God really just had me thinking about a lot of things. People have to get past the part of we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. My spouse isn't perfect. Our spouse isn't perfect. Marriage consists of two people who are imperfect coming together as one. And even though the Bible doesn't have anywhere a perfect marriage, it does tell you how to love. It tells you about 1 Corinthians 13, that you are supposed to have an unconditional love for your spouse. It tells you in Ephesians 5 how a husband should be. It tells you in Peter, it tells the wife to that she can win her husband over by her actions and not necessarily her words. So that was just really heavy in my spirit that people tend to be like what a marriage is. I'll never forget how it was for my spouse when he told me that our marriage is not a marriage. You know, you don't know what he don't know what a marriage is. You know, but God asked me to stand, and I've seen how God has called people to stand, and some of their stands went from a few months to like 30 years, and their marriages got restored. At the end of the day, it when it comes to the timing of when a marriage is restored, it be different reasons why a marriage isn't restored like quickly. It could be that there has to be a work done in us and our spouse, us being obedient and not trying to do our own thing. But God is very patient with us, and we have to know that He wouldn't ask us to do something that He wouldn't get His glory out of. And when has God had glory out of something that wasn't prosperous and just a blessing that really touched many people's lives? So I'm just thankful for the Bible, and that is also an illustration of the fact that marriage is filled with people that they just aren't perfect. But when we allow God to be the foundation of a marriage and allow Him to be number one, it be a threefold cord that cannot be snapped. That's when a marriage can be successful, even though we are not perfect. And I think it's very important that that is understood day one. And I will be whoever God assigned me to or have me reach out to get them to understand the seriousness of marriage is spiritual. And the moment we get married, Satan is not happy. He hates families. He hates marriage. He, basically came between God, obviously God, Adam and Eve. He just slithered right in there. Okay. And it even says in the word that two is better than one. That's why the devil comes in a marriage and destroys it. The first thing he does is he attacks the head. He attacks the husband with it's already hard for a husband, already hard for a man to like thinking about how he's going to maintain the household. He may be having things that's going on his job. It's then temptation where women trying to come on to them because the devil using them. It's all types of attacks that a husband endures, and it helps to have a praying wife, an understanding wife, to understand that we don't turn on our spouse, we turn to God, and we turn on the devil, because he's the one that's pulling the strings. Even if we have any type of problem with any human being, the devil's behind it. He's behind it. He uses people to be wicked because they are a willing vessel, but he's always behind it. And once we have that understood, he can't play us anymore. It says in James 4:7, therefore we are to submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee out of our lives. out of our marriage. We just have to have that understood and cling to God, because God wants our marriages more than we do.